Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the series premiere of Vagrant Queen. A great premiere, a lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Obviously, we get introduced to our main protagonist, Alita, which is interesting because her real name's like Eldaya, and I love that multiple people kind of make reference of like, not really much of a name difference because it's, and even I'm like, yeah, what kind of undercover name is that? But regardless, we get introduced to Alita, who is, a scavenger, and I love that whole thing. Was it Nigel and Carl at the beginning? And it's like, oh, Carl's got an ass of a face, but the voice of an angel. And I felt so bad. Nigel got his arm sliced off and and I love that she's about to kill Carl, and she's about to make a one-liner. I'm like, oh, she's like, oh, sing now, bitch, or something like that. She's like, no, I could do better. I'll come up with one next time and just blast him in there. I was like, poor Carl. But then she kills Nigel too because he was about to. But it was like, oh, you kind of felt bad. Because I felt so bad because Carl's the best, where he was just kind of like, basically he took everything Nigel was saying very literal, but it was good. He had like almost a little Drax, which I feel weird making that reference because it's something I talked about when I saw the trailer. Its effect is, it seems like this show heavily reminds me of a mix of Guardians of the Galaxy meet Killjoys. So I aesthetically I just catch that feeling and just like the vibe of the show in general. But it's also like that he immediately kind of answer a question I'd immediately have is like, is this the same galaxy that we live in? It's like, no, it's like not it's in another galaxy, not yours. And I'm like, oh, that's so interesting, especially when you get into the whole situation of Isaac. Because it turns out, because I thought, because we picked that up from, because he was like, because I think he made reference, did he make reference to like Colorado or something? And he makes reference to some state in the trailer, so that's why I was like, oh, are you from Earth? So it's like, this doesn't take place in the Milky Way galaxy, but they are aware of it. Regardless, there is a lot to kind of break down. Obviously, it's so interesting that Alita is this, scavenger, and the fact that she's working with this rinky-dink ship, which we later on find out its name is the Winnipeg. The fact of the matter, which I wonder, is that supposed to, because I feel like I know the word Winnipeg, or rather the name Winnipeg. I know it means something, because immediately in my head I'm thinking, when I hear Winnipeg, I'm thinking a Winnebago, like the little giant RVs and stuff like that. That's what it immediately makes me think of. But isn't that what a Winnipeg is? Isn't it? Because it is a vehicle, isn't it? So I mean, it would make sense, him being an Earthling and everything like that. But nevertheless, so the planet she's on right now is just to kind of get the ship fixed up for a little bit, but the Republic shows up, and I thought that was such an interesting thing because there's in an area they're not supposed to be. They don't actually have any jurisdiction on, was it Zyja? Poor dude at the beginning, getting his hair cut like that, and I was like, you poor bastard. It's like, oh, it looks like, oh, you like your hair and everything. There's also that interesting, because we get introduced to Lazaro, and that story he told about his dad was kind of interesting. He seems like kind of like a kooky villain in the sense of he seems like so lax, but at other times he can kind of be a monster. So it's going to definitely be interesting to kind of get more time with him. But especially the situation of like, he talked about like, oh yeah, I stole some alcohol from my dad, but I made sure to replace it with water, but he had security footage and he saw me, and to punish me, he burned me and gave me these scars. It's like, oh, no wonder you turned out as jacked up as you did. But regardless of all of that, we got Chaz and Amay, Amay being the mechanic and everything. When I hear Chaz, I immediately think of Chaz from Disenchantment, especially with the blue and everything. Obviously, very different characters, very different looks and everything, but I just can't help it. When I hear Chaz, I'm like, Chaz. Like, if you've seen Disenchantment, you get what I'm saying. You know what I also forgot? I was watching the episode and I made a reference that I'm going to make right now. And that said reference is saying that, obviously her going from Eldaya to Alita is not, obviously it's not that big of a difference. So it's not like going from Garnet to Dagger. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. There's your Final Fantasy IX reference of the day. Regardless, I went way out of my way to make that reference and going on that tangent, but I do apologize. It was in my head, kind of had to put it out there. But nevertheless, But her meeting Isaac, who, interesting enough, because I recognize this from the trailer, but it's the actor who plays Doc in Winona Earp, so there's your Syfy connection. But also, he was in a couple episodes of Lost Girl, another Syfy show. But nevertheless, he plays this dude named Isaac, and I didn't realize him and Alita would have such a complicated relationship, like, because it was interesting how they went about, because like in a trailer they show you Alita, well, Odea, but we'll go by Alita, Elle, when she was really, really young, and that's why I was kind of surprised when we go like 8 years back, and it's like, oh, you're about roughly the same. Well, Isaac explains it, basically she's been on a run for the past 15 years, so I'm like, oh, I guess that's, because we find out like the revolt happened like 15 years ago, but obviously she's been on a run ever since then. I guess in that 8-year period is when she's kind of been by herself, potentially, like there's still a lot we kind of have to fill in the gaps on, but we kind of get cuts back and forth to that, like that 8 years ago situation. So it's like, okay, so eventually we're going to go all the way back to the revolt and everything, because it was interesting, because like when we went to 8 years ago and Lazera and the Republic had shown up, he was like, oh, good to see you again, old friend. So it's like, so it is literally a usurping of the throne of like, oh, these were people who once served the crown, but now decided like, no, we're actually going to take control of this too. So I'm assuming even the people at the top of the food chain when it comes to this whole republic, I'm assuming those commanders and admirals and stuff like that were former staff that served under like the king, the queen, and everything. Well, the king and queen, whatever that situation. Well, because obviously, Alita's dad doesn't come up in conversation. Obviously, her mom does, so we don't know. Maybe her dad died years ago. Maybe he died during the revolt. Only her mom and her survived, so it might be a situation like that. Because she did say like her entire family was killed, so who knows? Maybe she had other siblings too. That's a whole conversation. But the fact is, her and Isaac. The fact is, apparently, like Isaac had shot her at one point in time, and he was like, I've apologized for this. She's like, actually, you've never actually apologized. He's like, okay. I'm sorry you forced me to shoot you. And she's like, what kind of messed up apology is that? Apparently she left him stranded in a place. So it's like they have a very, very complicated relationship. It's not like oh, you're my pal and everything. It's kind of like she heavily dislikes him and he uses her for his own means. I'm actually going to skip ahead. It's interesting because he ends up talking about the fact that he's a lawyer. And I'm like, you kind of being scummy the way you are literally makes sense. Not sure if anyone in this galaxy knows exactly what a lawyer is, but we as owners are like, that makes sense. So that's why you kind of act like the scummy person that you are, kind of making deals like, oh, we'll do this, I'll do this for you if you do this and that. But nevertheless, apparently it's like, oh, like I kind of sold you out. She's like, what? He's like, it sounds worse than what it actually is. Not technically. I gave them false information, but they actually followed me here. And I also love it because she's like, you're literally working with the people that killed my entire family. He was like, I was down on my luck. I didn't have any money. They offered me something. And it's like, that is kind of like, that's what I'm saying. And, Alita was told by her mom that basically as a queen, she is not kind of in a position where she can be so trusting of people. Trust isn't something she can give out. So, and obviously with the old Isaac thing, we can see like that kind of backfired on her. But I'm curious like how far their history goes back, because obviously it seems like within that 8-year time period is when things kind of went down. Like when she was on her own, she probably thought she had found an ally. But I'm curious like to see how Isaac kind of gets mixed up in all this, how he knows who she is. So it might be a thing of like she told him exactly who she was, and because she thought she could trust him, but it turns out, oh no, she can't, and he ends up being a backstabber, and everything. So I'm curious to see, obviously, like at the end of the day, what he wanted was his ship. Beyond that, we don't really know what it is 100% that Isaac wants, because we get why Amaze along on this ride, because it's like, well, she kind of had to be on the inside of the ship to kind of get things going in the grand scheme of things, but what is Isaac really going to get out of this? Because obviously there's the loyalists that show up, and obviously for Alita, she doesn't want to be a queen. Like she kind of throws that away just because it's like, she's been surviving, and it's just like, I can't be a queen or anything. Like obviously she was trained for it and stuff like that, but it's not a titling she wants, So for her, like all these people who serve her or trying to serve her, believe in her, it's like, but this is a loyalist army that's ready to fight at your behest. But for her, it's like, it's not what I want, I'm curious to see ultimately, like I'm going all over the place. I do apologize, but I am curious to see ultimately what the structure of the show is going to be like. Is it going to be kind of almost like that there is an overarching plot, but I'm curious, is everything going to be kind of an episodical thing? Like, very much like Killjoys, where it's like, oh, we're doing this and that at one time. Like, I wonder, is it going to become, oh, we're doing random stuff because she is a scavenger, or is everything going to be, it seems like every day it's just going to be like, even if it's kind of like a, episodical thing, like there's still going to be ties to the overarching plot. It's kind of what I'm trying to say. I think that's kind of the structure we're going to, I'm wondering, is it all going to be beat for beat, like everything is ultimately leading to the overarching plot? I'm sure it probably going to have elements of that all throughout. I don't think it's just going to be like, oh, we're going to be on random adventures. Cause I feel like some episodes of Killjoys, not all, I mean, as the show progressed, it became more and more about like, all is about serving the purpose of the overarching plot. But I feel like there are some episodes of Killjoys that were just kind of like, oh, standalone-ish, and just like, oh, we're on misadventures and we got caught up in a situation, but still I feel like even in those episodes, elements still kind of played going forward of like, oh, that's something we circle back to in some shape or form, because it did ultimately end up being something related to the main overarching plot. You get what I'm trying to say. But I think it's also interesting to the whole loyalist situation is the fact is that when she wanted to rescue Chaz, when it was like, oh, he was being threatened, like Lazaro was going to like, oh, I'm going to kill him. And like they knocked her out. I was like, I mean, to be fair, it makes sense because like her as queen, she's literally the last of the line. The fact is they say something I thought was kind of interesting where it's like, oh, you need to have a child like so that the bloodline can continue. I guess that way it's like it's a situation where it doesn't all rest on her shoulders, so that if she does die, which obviously they wouldn't want, but at least that way there'll be someone else to kind of carry the torch when it comes to the bloodline. But I think it's just so interesting that like they were kind of like, that was like one of the loyalists kind of brought that up. It's almost like, oh, it's almost like you want her to get knocked up immediately. That's weird. I feel like I never hear that in a case of a situation like this. I'm like, oh, you're the last of a bloodline, immediately get knocked up so we have other options just in case things kind of go sideways. I even love Alita being like, you knocked me out. And she's like, you hit, what was it? Like you knocked me out, you hit me, you hit a queen. She's like, that sounds so bad when you describe it like that. It's like, which other way would you want me to describe it? I also should talk about too, I like that they do give the villains personality. Like, even though they're faceless soldiers, like it's just kind of like that guy that had her in that anti-gravity, like trash and everything. And it's like, oh yeah, he's like, yeah, oh, I should turn you in because I'll kind of get his stars and stuff like that, and I'll be able to drive because I'll get my own like vehicle. Because like Malcolm, he gets super pissed. I mean, I bump his car, like he get his car bumped like one time, and it's just like stuff like that throughout the episode, and we're kind of like hearing people's names. It's just so interesting that they're giving these like faceless soldiers personality and aspects to them and everything. I even love, obviously, like Ame and Isaac disguise themselves and everything, and I love the whole thing of just being like, they should actually think about redesigning these uniforms, because this seems like it's so easy, and it's just like, oh, we're going to take this prisoner, why, and they're just like stammering their way through it, and it's like, oh yeah, because of it, he gave me a bad deal, so we're going to beat the crap out of him, and the other guy's like, all right, go ahead, take him. And then I love the showdown in the hallway. It's like, oh, where are you going? It's like, yeah, I forgot what they were saying. It was so stupid. I loved it, where it's just kind of like, oh yeah, Republic rules or something like that, and had their fist kind of pumped up in the air like, yeah. And it's like, now hand over the prisoner. You hand over the prisoner. And they take off their masks. It's like, wait, Alita, Isaac, Ame, what's going on? It's like, oh, look at us. We had the same idea. See, they really should change their uniforms, because this was like super easy. I love that. Them making a bit out of that. I also do love that Nim ended up helping her out, because for him, it's like, what the queen says, her plan should kind of go forward, even if her wish is to not be queen, it should be followed. So he's the only one that's kind of looking out from this situation from an outside perspective. Although the loyalists are so concerned about the bigger picture, they're so focused on what's best for the galaxy, not necessarily what Alita wants, so it turns into that. And then there was that moment where Alita kind of brings up like why she doesn't want to take Isaac on. It's like, yeah, you shot me. And Ame and Nim are like, oh, what? And he's like, it makes it sound worse than what it actually is. Okay, yes, it's exactly what it is, but the fact of the matter is, the thing he kept trying to tell her the entire time, because he was trying to negotiate and everything, it's like, I got some information, and it's like, oh, your mom is still alive. It's like, where did you get this? Like, he ends up talking about it later on that it was in Republic territory, but for him, it's like, I'm not going to tell you too much, because the last time, you left me stranded somewhere, so it's like, I'm not, I'm going to keep my cards close to the vest and everything. But obviously, it's kind of, and it shows you how messed up he is, because he's like, I will let you know where your mom is if you give me my shit back. It's like, this is her mom's life, her mom who she thought was dead for the past 8 years. You're kind of leveraging that against her, because even Alita had brought her up earlier, being like, wait, you knew this attack was coming, but you wanted me in this position where I'd kind of need your help just so you can bargain. And he's like, yeah, I kind of had to bring some bargaining chips to the table. Once again, all this kind of resonates with, like, makes sense why you're a lawyer. It's one of those things of, like, you're probably a lawyer who kind of represented bad people, didn't you? Maybe not. It's also interesting, too, to know that he has a wife, Hannah. It's like, that's a big question. Like, how did you go from your Earth to another galaxy? And even it was interesting because obviously it's something to the point, Alita, it's like no one knows how to get to Earth. Anyone tells you they can is lying. So it's like, how'd you literally get to another galaxy? How did that come about? Like, once again, there's like so much in that to kind of unpack, along with their complicated history. But I did like the fact there's obviously like the firefight, the slow motion, especially like, once again, I'm a sucker for freezing frames and stuff like that, like mid jump, blood splattering out of people. It's so badass. But you know, when it was all said and done, you know, Nim getting shot like that, and Lazaro, home dude shows up like that. I'm like, oh, that sucks. And obviously she wants to go back for him, but Nim was like, no, like, the fact is there's so many people out there who believe in you, so you have to keep going forward, and sacrifices himself. We see at the end, though, he isn't dead. So, and you see home dude smiling, so it's like, okay, so he's probably going to take him as a prisoner and kind of pump him for information, or maybe it's a situation of like, oh, he might be in a process of sadly potentially dying, you know. So I'm thinking they're going to use him for a means to an end. There's also this little joke they use where it's kind of like, oh my God, Lazaro, kind of good on him. He ended up finding one person on this place that Alita would care about. The bartender. I don't know how to interpret that, because I feel like that joke could be interpreted two ways. Like, my initial thought is like, oh, you're saying that because like it's just a bartender, why would she care about him? That might be the joke. Or is he joking because the fact is she's kind of all about her drinks and alcohol? That the fact is, oh, you would find the one person that she cares about, and it wouldn't be the bartender because he's constantly serving her drink. That's what I'm thinking. I'm leaning more towards the former, but the latter kind of seems like it could potentially be a possibility. I feel like it's the former because he's like, oh, that's your brother? Oh, kind of feel bad for saying that. That, you know, but still. Because obviously, I brought it up earlier, they're not supposed to be on this planet. So, like, one of the guys was like, oh, maybe we should contact the admirals. And Lazaro kind of shoots him. And it's like, oh, does anyone else have any smart ideas? So, I'm like, I'm assuming they didn't give him permission to do that. It's like, he's kind of going a little rogue. Because to be fair, because even that was something Alita had joked, was telling that soldier. It's like, oh, no. If you don't bring me to Lazaro, he wants to kill me. He's been wanting to kill me. If you took this closure away from him, he'd kill you, you know? So obviously killing her is that important to him, which is like, I'm so curious. Like, once again, especially if it is the way, like I said, I'm understanding it, of like, you once served them, so now you want to kill them, but why? Like I said, it's a great introduction, and it does a very nice job of being like, all right, so there's so much of this world building we got to continue to do. And also, there's obviously a lot more connections in this regard, because I thought we were kind of going a little more from scratch of like, oh, this is a ragtag team group of misfits that have no connection. It's a little more Killjoy-ish, or, you know, Doom Patrol. It's not very Misfits. I was thinking very Misfits of like, oh, we have no connection. We're complete strangers that met each other. But it's like Killjoys how like obviously Dutch and Johnny had their relationship, but obviously Johnny and Davin are brothers. Obviously in Doom Patrol, most of the Doom Patrol knew each other with the exception of Cliff. So that is kind of that similar situation. Is kind of like the regard I was kind of thinking of, or even Legends of Tomorrow, which kind of fits. Like, obviously they have history with each other, but as a team and a squad, it's still kind of unknown territory. So it kind of works in that case, because obviously Amaya is like the one outsider of like, I don't know what's going on. I mean, I'm aware of who, you know, Alita is now. Now that I know, like, oh, she's a queen and everything. So I just think that's kind of an interesting element. But obviously, like, I was never expecting her and Alita and Isaac to have such a lot of history like that. But there's also like the loyalists, they were able to get away. So what that's going to look like. So not only are you going to have the Republic after, you're also going to have the loyalists who are going to try and track you down and protect you, and probably like keep you in one particular spot because they want to protect you. So it's like they're once again kind of going against what your wishes and everything, but it's kind of probably going to be that thing of destiny. obviously, and it's something I brought up during the trailer, I am curious about, is it purely just because of the bloodline, the reason why her being on the throne is so important, or is there more so, or is there kind of other storyline elements connected to her, like her bloodline? Is it just about being a royal, or is a royal kind of a byproduct of that bloodline, that the bloodline actually has another duty, or maybe a more important duty? It just happens to coincide with you being royalty. That's what I'm curious about. That was kind of my thought during the trailer. Like, we will kind of ultimately have to wait to see. But like I said, I think this was kind of a great setup, and I'm very interested to kind of continue going forward and seeing like what else this show has in store for us. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good